You're listening to the Jesus Culture Sacramento Message of the Week. We hope you enjoy this teaching. For more information on our church, visit jcsacramento.com.
We're calling today Engage Sunday. In January, Banning started off the year sharing about the theme that we really felt like as a team, as a staff, for us as a community, that was the thing we're supposed to focus on this year. And every year we do that. We ask God, like, God, what are you emphasizing? And that theme was engaging our city. And so Banning shared an amazing word. I really encourage you to go back and listen to that because he covered a lot that I would love to repeat but don't have time for. And I just encourage you to listen to that. And then also in March, Nate Edwardson came and spoke. He shared this message on redeeming culture. I mean, there was if you like to tweet like one-liners, there's too many to count. But he said just some amazing things. One of them is that Jesus didn't rise from the dead so that we could do church better. He rose from the dead to do life better. He did this message on redeeming culture that I really encourage you to go back and listen to as well, because it will fit into what I'm going to talk to you about today. But today's going to be a little bit more practical. I'm going to talk about engaging our city, but I'm going to focus on the word engage. Before I jump in a little further, if you have your Bibles, open them to John chapter 9, and just I'm going to jump to this verse in just a minute. So if you have a physical Bible, put your finger in there. If you have your phone, you can just pop it up later. But I want to talk about, what does this word engage mean? When we talk about, you say a phrase like engaging the city, it sounds really cool and like motivating, like, yeah, that's great. But what does that mean? What does that look like for you and for me? And even more specifically, what do we mean when we say the word engage? For those of you that are single out there, we're not talking about getting engaged, but we'll join with you and agree. Maybe that works into part of your call. Like God's got you on that. But I know for me, and I'm going to break down this word in just a little bit. When I hear the word engage, I think of my wife's projects. She's sitting right here, so I may get in trouble later, but I'm gonna press through anyways. My wife's got a lot of vision, and so I've got a lot of projects that I get to be a part of as a result of that vision. I will say this, most of those projects I probably would never do on my own, but I am engaged because I love my wife, and I have a healthy fear of God and my wife. And so I do these things with joy, but this word engage it's interesting because I love to look at words. I think in our culture, a lot of times we have words that are a little bit cheap, to be honest. There's so many words flying at us, emails and social media and TV and texts, and we have more information now than we've had in any point in history. And so when we say words, I think in general, a lot of times we know what they mean, but actually there's an origination, there's a depth of many words that I don't think we fully understand. And so I dove a little bit into this word engage and actually found that to be true. I just began to read a little bit and looked up the origin of the word engage. And so the definition is to engage in means to participate or be involved in. But the word originated in the late Middle English from the French word engager. The word originally meant to pawn or to pledge something, but then it later emphasized to pledge oneself to do something. And then hence to enter into a contract in the mid-16th century. And then it later evolved into involve oneself in an activity. And then in the 17th century, it kind of took on this thing of meaning to engage in combat. Like, I bet you didn't think that when you're saying engage, right? I want to get engaged. I want to, no. But here's the reason why. As I started reading this word, marriage can be combat sometimes, but you just got to push through. You know what I mean? It's all good. But I think the reason why this word had that origin is, if you think about it, especially in the 16th and 17th century, there was definitely banks and, people had resources, but it's not like it is today. You don't pull out Square Cash, credit card. There aren't banks and ATMs on every corner. And so when loans or exchanges are taking place. I mean, you kind of, talk to your grandfather or someone like, we used to just do deals with a handshake, It's definitely not that way now, but especially so back then, when you pledged yourself to something for an exchange, especially, if there was a loan or something like that, your collateral was your life. Because at the time, slavery, which we are totally against, was normal then. And so people would go into a deal and they would make a pledge. They would engage into an interaction. And if they couldn't pay that back, the collateral was their life. Or, sadly, so maybe one of their children. That's how things went down often. And later on, as kingdoms and kings and villages and countries are going to war, the crusades and different things are happening around. When you said, I'm going to engage yourself, it meant to engage in a battle. There wasn't the draft, the lottery going on, like your village goes to town, you're in, right? But to engage meant to pledge yourself to combat. It's kind of extreme and intense, but it gives us, I think, a better picture when we talk about the word engage. It's not just like, or when we say engage our city, it's not just like, I'll pick up some trash and throw up a couple prayers and maybe do a little volunteer time on the side. The actual origination of the word to engage is something much deeper. Now, I will say this, when we say city, like engage the city, Banning kind of covers this in the first message I mentioned in January. When we say engage the city, we mean anywhere that you are Monday through Saturday. Like that's you engaging the city. It's not that complicated. If you're, whatever you do, we're called to engage where we are. So when we talk about this word and we say engage, it takes a deeper connection and ownership. And if you think about it, what are the things that you engage in? We engage the things that we care about. We engage the things that are connected to our dreams and desires. We engage things that we're interested in. We engage things that are connected to someone we care about, hence the projects at home for my wife. We engage in things that cause results and bring change. And we even engage things that benefit us, even though they may cause some pain. All the ladies in the house that have kids will say, hey, I'm with you on that, right? Like there are things that we willingly engage in that are not easy, that are painful, but we do it joyfully and willingly because of the connection. It's not out of obligation or motivation or someone forcing us to do it. It's kind of a funny example, but Andy Bird is a missionary that we support with YWAM, and Banning and we went out to Kona for a ministry trip to connect. I serve the Lord. I'm willing to sacrifice. It's just the price I pay for his glory, But it was a really good trip. They're doing amazing things. They're raising leaders and sending them all over the nations. But one of the things they do is they use CrossFit to share the gospel. And so they train leaders and then they send them into nations that are closed, that people normally couldn't go, but they love CrossFit. CrossFit, if anyone do CrossFit in here? All right. It's a unique community that is, CrossFit's taken off all over, right? So they do this. And so for me, I'm like, I want to check this out. And I honestly had never done CrossFit before. So I work out regularly and run, and I think I'm in decent shape. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to do this. So I go to CrossFit, outwardly humble, inwardly a little cocky, like, I got this, no big deal, right? Oh man, I'm telling you, it was brutal. And I thought I was in shape, but apparently I was not, because at least maybe it was the workout of the day. That day, it was brutal. I was just dying. Like we were pulling sleds and we had all these circuits and we're doing these weights. And there was times I just stood there. Like, I can't do this. I can't do this. There was so much pain. And I started thinking no one made me do this. I willingly engaged into this thing. I may never do it again. No, I'm going to give it another shot. But it's just another example of there's things that we will engage in that are not easy. But, the result, what comes out of it is so worth it, right? Well, the thing that we want to talk about is we say we're engaging our city. This is absolutely not like a plug to force people to do something or to do more. Like that's the last thing that I want to be a part of, that we want to be a part of as a church. And actually what we're called to as believers is not out of obligation. There's an invitation to say we get to participate and engage in the things that are on your heart, to see our world, our city, our families, the places around us encounter God. I would say this, as followers of Jesus, we should care about what Jesus cares about. And this is my opinion, you could disagree with me, but I would propose that in any area that we engage in to serve or love others, that's not the first reason we do it in most cases, or even just for people around us. It's tied back to an area that we care or a person that we care for. Like that's where it starts. That's how we look at, like, what does it mean to engage? What motivates us? It's out of something that touches our heart, that or is connected to someone that we care about. You can look at this verse here in Matthew chapter 9, verse 35. We take our lead from Jesus, and I saw this, I was talking with my mom this last week, and I saw this passage in a totally different light. It's very familiar as we read this. It says this: Jesus went into all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom and healing every disease and sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless and like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into the harvest field." In many cases, and I grew up in the church and I love this passage, we skip to this end that says the harvest is plentiful, the workers are few, ask the Lord to send the workers in the harvest. That is a very true and accurate statement, but it is not complete because there's two other parts that lead to that. The first part is Jesus, we see this, and it's so easy to read over this. It says when he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them. If you look at that word, he was moved. Like, I believe, I wasn't there and it doesn't fully articulate this in scripture, but I believe there were probably tears in his eyes as he's looking at people who are in bondage or broken or hurting and facing things. And he knows the answer for their life. And that's what his life mission was. And that's what he did. You read this passage before in the beginning, he just got back from healing every disease and sickness, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom. And then he looks at this crowd and he sees areas that those things need to happen. He sees people that need to encounter the truth of what he is, of what it is that he carries. The first thing that leads us to engaging is the heart of Jesus. Like that to me, like that puts things in perspective. It takes away the complication, and it should motivate us not out of obligation, but this is what Jesus has a heart for. I want to pay attention to that. But here's the second thing. I believe when Jesus looked at this crowd, he wasn't just looking at needs. He was looking at people that he knew once they were healed, once they had encountered hope and they encountered him, they were people that would then be empowered to do the same thing. That's what he did with his disciples. And so when he says harvest, like, we don't go around saying like, we do in church, but it doesn't really make sense anywhere else. Like you start calling people harvest, that'd be kind of weird. You're like, gonna harvest my organs or what's going on? Like, it's weird, right? They're just people. He's looking at crowds, he's looking at people, but he's using this analogy to say, these people need people that will do the same thing, share the good news, pray for the sick, declare the kingdom, to see others encounter that. And that's why he uses this analogy. The harvest is ripe, but the workers are few. He sees a need, and he sees more than just the needs of people. He sees a void that he's driven by to say, I want to not only live this myself, but empower other people. And we see that happen with the disciples. To me, that makes us even more complete and ties into what we're going after as a community, is that we're not trying to build programs. We're not trying to obligate and motivate and twist people's arm to do more for God. We're reminding ourselves and reminding this community what he has done for us, his heart towards you and me, and saying, this is his heart. we're moved with compassion to engage our city because this is what Jesus does and is gonna continue to do, and we're following him. So if that's what he's doing, that's what we're doing. And that's what we wanna talk about here. Actually, it's happening all over in our community already. We intentionally don't have an outreach department at Jesus Culture. I don't know if you knew that. Not because we don't want to reach out, but because we believe that a lifestyle of a believer engages and cares in wherever it is. I mean, we're going to different nations, but it's not limited to there. I'm going to share some examples of this, but we're launching our new episode of our church magazine in May, and I love it because the whole theme is about engage from the start to the end. And one of the things in there is we highlight, I think it's 3 different people that are engaging different areas of our region. One of those is there's a couple, Rashawn and Brittany Smith, that had a heart for just the poor and the homeless. And they just started going down to homeless camps, no plan, no idea. And God began to just, people started jumping in, and now they're doing this amazing thing that you'll read about. There's, Ben Serpel, a good friend of ours. He's a social worker, and he's in that realm influencing and loving people. And we got Nancy Atchley, who's the founder and director of Powerhouse Ministries here in Folsom. She goes to our church, and you hear some of her story. Man, it goes on and on. We have people with a heart for art and music that are beginning to gather other people with that heart. We have people, Leanne and Josiah Danielson, who are partnered with World Relief and serving refugees that have come to the Sacramento region. We have a good neighbor team that's engaging in that. We've got entrepreneurs that are gathering together saying, how do we use business to display God's love and power and see some of the things that are rooted in poverty change and create jobs. We have people that have a heart for adoption and foster care. And Paul, a good friend of ours, has this ministry called Lounge of Life, and they're reaching the club scene and the party scene downtown. They have an event on April 27th. And they're going after like people that would never come to church and saying, we want to show you the love of God. We've got people that are teachers and principals and doctors and nurses and athletes and business owners and general managers and people in sales and insurance, finance, customer care, politicians, counselors, scientists, real estate agents, police officers, baristas, nannies, students, contractors. The list goes on and on. We, in every area that we either work or have a passion for, we're not even talking about hobbies yet. Like, these are areas that we have an opportunity to engage and demonstrate what we've encountered. And here's the good news. No one else should be doing that for us. We should all be doing that. Not because we should feel guilty or condemned, but like this is the natural outflow of what a life and a follower of Jesus looks like. I'm gonna show you a video. One of our teams, we took a team to Berlin. And I love this because we've been trying to find a time to show this because it's just amazing what God did during this trip. But they went to Germany in Berlin to serve and love refugees. It was one of the things that we partnered with Andy Bird and YWAM. I want to show you this video, but just, again, it's just another picture of what can happen when someone just steps out and engages an issue. So check out this video.
Really impacted me the most about this trip is just the extraordinary work that God is doing amongst the Muslims. He's brought a people group that's largely unreachable in the Middle East, and through the wars and things that they're going through, transferred literally millions of them into Europe, where they've become a captive audience for the gospel and are just hungry for God. Men are actually leaving Islam in droves. And just this one couple, just this one missionary couple, even before we got there, we're baptizing 10 to 15 Muslims per week.
The thing that I think about when somebody asks me about the trip is how receptive the Muslims were to having somebody come up to them and talk to them. They are so excited that somebody would pay attention to them because they are so rejected and so cast off, not only by the Germans, but also by their own people. Satan has stolen their identity from them, and it's a privilege to be able to restore their identity.
We just had never seen ministry as easy anywhere in the world as we saw with the Muslims in Berlin because of the hunger they had. One day we went into the Arab district where most of the refugees hang out, and we came out of the train station, sung one worship song. Several people would be drawn to the worship. One person was led to Christ before we actually finished our first song. Another few people had been drawn, and that launched us into a ministry that was so concentrated. We literally spent about a 4-hour block of time, and we didn't make it more than about 150 feet because God would bring somebody to us to minister to, share the gospel, pray with, whatever, and then we would make it like 3 steps, and he would bring another person.
On our way home from a day of ministry, it was Sonia, Adrian, and myself. I saw a lady walk onto the train, and she was trembling, she was jerking, just not able to really control her movements. She sat right next to us, and I immediately felt prompted by the Holy Spirit to go talk to her. We introduced ourselves. She asked what we were doing. I said we were here from America to pray for people. So I asked if we could pray. As I began to pray, I felt the Holy Spirit say, ask her if she needs a hug. And so when I asked her, she said, yes, I'll receive a hug. I went in to hug her, and as I started speaking in tongues over her, all the jerking and shaking that was happening within her body pretty much completely stopped. And as I put my arm around her, she just sunk into my shoulder, and she just sat there in my shoulders for a long time.
At one point, I asked her, do you want Jesus to be with you always? And she said, yes. So right then and there, I prayed with her to receive Christ.
I feel like one of the things I noticed was people were drawn to the worship. As they would get drawn in to us just worshiping God and creating a space for him to come, our team would then get to engage with those people and have really beautiful conversations.
Well, we are in an open market on Sunday, and we were walking through the open market, and God had me lock eyes on a gentleman selling sunglasses. So I approached him, asked him what his name was. I asked him where he was from, and he said he was from Pakistan. And I asked him if he'd ever had a dream about a man in a white robe. And he looked around, and his eyes got really big. And he says, yes, I've been having dreams about a man in a white robe. And I said, can I pray for you? And he said, yes. And I put my hand a few inches from his chest, and he grabbed it and put it right on his heart. There's a thirst, a hidden thirst. Jesus said that we are the salt of the earth, and once they start talking to you, they get that hunger and that thirst.
Everywhere the team went, they were ministering. It was on the train, walking on the streets, wherever we were, the folks were ministering. The team really walked in tremendous anointing and power. The really amazing things that God's doing is this mass movement and migration of Muslims into Germany and into these Western countries are now experiencing God. They're experiencing the gospel. And there's this vision that God is going to send this is an army of missionaries back into the Middle East in places that we with white skin cannot go, and just use this time of history as a historical shift of movement into the Middle East for the work of God.
So cool. I just love stories. You know, it's not complicated. You just step out, and then sometimes we don't know where or how or who, but when we engage, there are people on the other side of that God is lining up and setting up. It's so cool. And here's the thing, you don't have to go to Germany to do this. It's wherever we go, and it doesn't even have to be a stranger. It can be someone in your family or whoever it is. Like, we just engage with the heart of God. Here at Jesus Culture, we want to see this grow, and we measure success not by how many people are coming here, but we want to measure success on how many we can send. But sending isn't based on a program. Like, if you sign up here, you go through this class, Like, we try to keep it simple because you shouldn't have to go ask permission or whatever to go love someone, engage and demonstrate the power of God. So one thing we're practically doing, if you can put this slide up, is we kind of created this survey. If you go to jcsacramento.com/engage, really practically, this year, part of my role has really been shifting to take what we're focusing on engaging the city and make some tracks to help make this easier. Like I said, we're not building a whole outreach department. What we're doing is we're finding ways to engage people. I already gave you lists of, and there's even more of people all over that are just stepping out and doing this. There's two things that we're doing. If you use this survey, you can go on, just really simple. You put your name and your email, and then there's a whole list of areas, arts and entertainment, education, the homeless, missions. Like there's just all these areas, and it's not exhausted. There's another thing at the bottom that says other, and you can type something in. What we're trying to do is connect people in our community already have a heart for something. Like there's people that have a heart for the homeless and you don't know each other. So we want to get your email, and we're creating these subgroups to connect you to each other, as well as there's tons of organizations throughout the Sacramento region that we already are partnered with that we want to point you to as well. We're in the midst of, a little later this fall, we're building a website so that we kind of remove ourselves as the middleman, and it's a place where you can go connect with other people as well as get connected to these areas that you already have a heart for. Some of these areas are really new and don't have many existing tracks. For example, the entrepreneurial track. I had some people talk to me after the last service, and there's about 3 or 4 guys that are successful entrepreneurs that are beginning to come up with some ideas to gather others. And we want to go after, how do we create, one of the ways you impact poverty is create more jobs. And so they want to find ways to create more jobs in the region. And so anyways, these are all areas that we're going to network and use technology, but also empower people to connect with each other and connect to areas so that we can, if you feel stuck, you can get you some steps to practically and go after that. I will say this, right now on the survey, you can only select one area, which we're going to change that a little later. We want you to focus on what's the one area that you really, you may, like a lot of us, like, I click them all, Well, that's great. You don't have that much time, and we want to be really strategic and intentional because, we're like, I'm going to engage the city, and then we don't do anything. So we want to say, like, what's that one area that if you had to pick one, what would you go after? So we really encourage you, please fill that out because it'll help us live this out practically as we go from here. But I will say this, as we kind of wrap things up a little bit, when we talk about engaging our city, I think a really important factor is remembering and knowing who you are, knowing who we are, because it'll help us. Even like when you know who you are, it helps you to navigate through things sometimes that feel overwhelming or complicated. If you look at Matthew chapter 5, I love this verse because it's just so simple. It says, "You're the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." Do you know that it actually takes more work to hide your light than just to let it shine? Like that's one of the things in this verse. It says, don't hide your light under a lamp, but put it on a stand so everyone can see it. You have to work harder to, hide that light. If you realize I already am light, I carry the light of the world in me. Wherever I go, there's light. So when you know that, you're not intimidated even by a big situation that seems dark, overwhelming, and hopeless. Because here's the other thing. In Psalms 139:11, it says, "If I say surely darkness will hide me and light become night around me, even darkness will not be dark to you. For the night shines like the day." And I love this verse. It says, "For darkness is as light to you." That's the truth of who we are and what God says about us. He says, you, me, we're the light of the world. That's who you are. You can't change that. You can work hard at hiding that and trying to be something else. But if you want to just be who you are, step out and walk in that. And it actually gives you a pathway to know, like, okay, Monday through Saturday or whatever I'm doing, if I'm light, God, what does that look like? Jesus really practically, like he was raising up leaders that would engage and change the world. And they didn't have to strive, but he did have to teach them because much like us, the disciples had a hard time getting this sometimes. If you look in Mark chapter 6 and Mark chapter 8, there are two stories. They're miracles that Jesus performed that many of us know. In Mark 6, it's the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000, right? Love the story. It's amazing. But if you look closely at it, the amazing thing about it, there are three things that happen. The first is, I'll just kind of paraphrase. The disciples came and noticed, hey, there's a problem. Good first step, but that's where most of us just stay. Like, we're professional problem finders. There's a problem. Someone should do something about that. Like, I don't know what they're doing, you know. And Jesus, what does he do? He turns to them and says, you give them something to eat. They point out there's no food for the people. Like, they think they're doing something great, which is good. That's a good start. And then Jesus turns it back on them and says, well, you give them something to eat. And they're like, whoa. That's not our job, God. We bring the problems to you. We complain. We tell you what's wrong, and then you fix it, right? If you've come to Elements, you've heard me talk about this a little bit, but I love this because Jesus is trying to shift and train them. And he says this, okay, I'll help you out here. How many, in verse 38 of Mark 6, he says, how many loaves do you have? And then they say 5 loaves and 2 fish. And you know what happens. If you don't read the story, it's pretty amazing. Jesus was trying to teach them, instead of just doing it for them, saying, okay, you see a need. That's the first step, recognize it. But 2, the next part of that is, I'm a part of the solution. I'm gonna do something about it. And most of us, like, maybe we try really hard and we get there and we're like, I tried that, but I don't know what to do. It's overwhelming. The last piece is we look at, what do you have in your hands? The reason why he wants to get us to that point is, as little as it seems, when you bring it to him, what does he do? He multiplies it and feeds the thousands. It was more than 5,000 because that was just men. Like, this is what he wants to do with our lives. We see a need, we see something, I don't know what to do. And we say, God, I see that. I want to be part of that solution, but this is all I got. And he's like, great, we can work with that. Because now he's going to get glory, and you're actually going to get to walk out who God's made you to be and see growth, not only in the miracle that he does through your hands, but the miracle he does in you and seeing yourself and God differently. Like, it's kind of funny. We don't have time to go into this, but in Mark chapter 8, the same thing happens. Jesus had a lot of crowds following him. I won't read it, but the exact same thing happens. And he says the same thing. Look at it yourself. Mark 8, chapter 5. They're in a remote place. He tells them again, verse 5, that he says to them, how many loaves do you have? So as we close today, I just want to say God's plan for revival, God's plan for transformation, God's plan for our city is you. There's no plan B or C. And all we really need to do is say, God, I'm willing to engage my life, to bring what I have, to say what is in my hand. God, you use it and you multiply it. And the purpose is, Jesus, you have compassion on people. You have compassion on the crowds. Fill me with your compassion. I'm willing to step out. Lord, use me. Engaging the city doesn't mean you have to solve or be a part of every problem, but it doesn't mean engaging what is in front of you. It doesn't mean engaging the thing that you do see. It means asking God for his heart and for his perspective on our region, our city, your social circles, your workplace, your kids' school, your friends, your neighborhood, your family. I think engaging looks a lot like adopting people, areas of culture, or your workplace or your neighborhood, adopting, calling something as your own and saying, this is my responsibility. I'm going to own this. This is our dream that we want to be known for as a community. We don't care who gets credit, to be honest. It's not about a church or a name of a person. We want God to get glory because people encounter him. And you and I are a piece of that, no matter how it goes. Like I said, you can fill out this survey, and we've got teams of people going. Natalie over here, she's leading a team to Puerto Rico next month. I'm leading a team on Friday to Romania. So if you want to go to Puerto Rico, talk to Natalie. They're raising $25,000, is that it? To help rebuild some neighborhoods or an area that got hit by hurricanes. But I love it when someone like gets a crazy idea that says, I'm gonna do this, and I have no clue on how I'm gonna do it. I think if you're in over your head, you're actually in the best place you should be. Like, if you can do it on your own strength, then it's not a big enough vision. Like God works in the realm of the impossible. And we say, I don't know what to do. God, I need you. I need you. I want to close in prayer here. I just want to take a moment too to listen, to say, God, what are you saying to me? What are you speaking? What's in front of me? What's in my hands? What have you called me to? Don't look to the person to your left or your right, because what God's called you to is not what he's called them to. But it originates out of God. I'm following you. Jesus, you're my motivation. It's not guilt or obligation or duty. It's Jesus, I want all that you have for my life. So Jesus, we just say we're here. God, move us with the things that move your heart. As a community, I pray that we would be known as those who engage and bring hope and the love of God wherever we go. I thank you that even right now, God, that you're speaking to people and giving fresh vision and perspective for where they work or the influence they have. God, where there's questions or confusion, God, I pray that your peace and your voice would come and speak. But we just say, Jesus, it's all for you. We're following you, and God, it's our prayer that in this city, in this region, that God, you would be famous, that you would be known, because people can point to all different places and different people and see you through our lives. We just say we love you, God. Just take a moment. I want you just to listen to what he's saying to you, or maybe reminding you of something he spoke to you a while ago, or stirring vision again for something you felt was impossible. Maybe you gave up and said, I can't do this. Come to him again and say, God, this is what I have. Take this and use this life. Use what I have for your glory.
Thanks for listening to the Message of the Week. Hungry for more? Search Jesus Culture on your podcast platforms to check out more from our Jesus Culture Podcast Network.